In the small coastal town of Meridian Bay, everyone knew that old Mr. Hargrove's clock shop was peculiar. Nestled between the bakery and pharmacy on Main Street, the narrow storefront with its perpetually dusty windows displayed dozens of timepieces that always seemed slightly off, either running too fast, too slow, or sometimes backward. Despite this, the craftsmanship was undeniable. Locals joked that while a Hargrove clock might not tell you the correct time, it would outlast your grandchildren. Hannah Ward had never entered the shop until the day after her mother's funeral. The cold January afternoon found her standing before the weathered door, watching her breath cloud in the air as she gathered courage to go inside. Her mother had left her very little: some costume jewelry, photo albums, and a broken pocket watch that had belonged to Hannah's grandfather. "I should at least see if it can be fixed," she murmured to herself, pushing through the door. A cascade of tiny bells announced her arrival. The interior was larger than she expected, stretching back into impossible shadows. Hundreds of clocks covered every surface. Ornate grandfather clocks stood sentinel along the walls. Cuckoo clocks hung in clusters from the ceiling, and display cases held pocket watches arranged in concentric circles. Their collective ticking created a discordant symphony that made Hannah's teeth ache. "Hello," she called out, her voice swallowed by the incessant ticking. A shuffling sound came from behind a tall cabinet, and Mr. Hargrove appeared. He was thinner than Hannah remembered from glimpses through the shop window, skin like parchment stretched over angular bones, wisps of white hair haloing a spotted scalp. His eyes, however, were startlingly alert, an unusual amber color that seemed to shift in the dim light. "Miss Ward," he said, recognition immediate. "I've been expecting you." Hannah felt a chill travel up her spine. "How did you know my name?" "Your grandfather's watch," he replied simply. "I made it." She pulled a pocket watch from her purse. The gold case was dented on one side, the glass face cracked. "Can you fix it?" Mr. Hargrove took it with reverence, turning it over in his long fingers. "Benjamin Ward, 1947. He traced the inscription. "Did he tell you about it?" "He died before I was born." "Yes," the old man said softly. "He would have." Something in his tone made Hannah uneasy. "What do you mean?" "Every Hargrove timepiece is unique, Miss Ward. This one, this one keeps a different kind of time." He clicked it open, revealing the motionless gears inside. "Your grandfather understood its purpose, which was to measure the hours remaining." He looked up, those amber eyes searching her face. "Not hours in a day, but hours in a life." Hannah laughed nervously. "That's impossible, is it?" He gestured around the shop. "Every clock here serves a purpose beyond marking minutes. Some track lunar cycles, others the tides. Some," he lowered his voice, "measure the distance between worlds." "I just want it fixed," Hannah said firmly. "Mr. Hargrove nodded. "I can repair it, but you must understand what you're asking. Once it starts again, it will continue its count." "Fine," she said, assuming this was just the eccentricity locals warned about. "How much?" "No charge for family pieces. Return Friday at closing." 3 days later, Hannah returned as instructed. The shop looked different somehow, the shadows deeper, the ticking louder. Mr. Hargrove waited behind the counter, her grandfather's watch resting on a velvet cushion. "Good as new," he said, though something in his expression suggested otherwise. The watch gleamed, its dents removed, glass pristine. When Hannah reached for it, Mr. Hargrove caught her wrist. "Before you take it," he said, "you should know. It has exactly 60 hours remaining." Hannah pulled her hand away. "Mr. Hargrove, I appreciate the craftsmanship, but the mystical act is unnecessary." "Not an act," he insisted. "Your grandfather used this watch to track the hours he had left after his diagnosis. Terminal cancer. When the watch stopped, so did he." Hannah's mouth went dry. Her mother had told her that her grandfather predicted his own death to the hour. She had attributed it to family mythology. "The watch doesn't cause death," Mr. Hargrove continued. "It merely measures what remains. Once wound, it begins its final countdown." "Then I won't wind it," Hannah said simply. "It's already wound." His amber eyes seemed to glow. "I had to test the mechanism." Hannah stared at the watch. Its second hand moved steadily, hypnotically. Stop it then. I cannot. No one can. It will continue until Hannah snatched the watch and shoved it into her pocket. This is ridiculous. Thank you for the repair. She hurried home, the watch a heavy presence against her thigh. Inside her apartment, she pulled it out. The craftsmanship was undeniable. It looked brand new. Despite her skepticism, a thread of unease wound through her as she watched the seconds tick by. Nonsense, she muttered, placing it on her nightstand before preparing for bed. That night, she dreamed of clocks with human faces, their hands spinning wildly as they counted down to some unknown event. She woke gasping, instinctively reaching for the watch. 57 hours remaining. The next day, Hannah went to work at the local library, trying to forget about Mr. Hargrove's warning. But every few minutes, she found herself checking the watch, watching precious minutes disappear. 53 hours, 49 hours, 45 hours. That evening, Hannah's best friend Ellie came over for their weekly dinner. You're distracted, Ellie observed as Hannah checked the watch for the dozenth time. Hot date tomorrow. No, it's... Hannah hesitated. My grandfather's watch. The clockmaker said something strange when he fixed it. She explained Mr. Hargrove's claim. To her surprise, Ellie didn't laugh. My aunt had a music box from that shop, Ellie said. She claimed that whenever it played on its own, someone in town would die. We thought she was superstitious until... Until what? Until it played the morning she died. Heart attack. Completely unexpected. Hannah felt cold. You can't seriously believe. I'm just saying, there are rumors about Hargrove pieces. People keep them because they're beautiful, but there's always something off. After Ellie left, Hannah couldn't sleep. The watch ticked on her nightstand. 38 hours, 34 hours, 30 hours. The next morning, Hannah called in sick. She drove to the neighboring town's antique market, where she found a dealer specializing in timepieces. Hargrove, the dealer whistled, examining the watch. Museum quality. I'll give you 5,000. For a moment, Hannah was tempted. Then she remembered Mr. Hargrove's words. What if it was true? What if selling the watch didn't stop its countdown? I'm sorry, she said. It's not for sale. She drove home, the watch now reading 26 hours. A deep exhaustion settled over her. Whether from stress or something else, she couldn't tell. That night, she slept fitfully, dreaming of amber eyes and ticking clocks. When she woke, the watch read 18 hours. Fear gnawed at her stomach. That afternoon, she returned to Hargrove's shop. Please, she begged the old man. Stop it. I told you, he said gently. I cannot. Then what's going to happen to me? That depends on how you use the time. He studied her face. Your grandfather used his remaining hours to make amends, to say goodbye. When his watch stopped, he was at peace. I don't want to die, Hannah whispered. Death finds us all, Miss Ward. The watch merely provides certainty where usually there is none. Hannah left the shop in tears, the watch reading 16 hours. As she drove home, a sudden clarity came over her. If these were truly her last hours, what did she want to do with them? She called her estranged father. After an awkward start, they talked for 2 hours, really talked for the first time in years. She visited her mother's grave, leaving flowers and apologies for things left unsaid. She wrote letters to friends, expressing gratitudes and regrets. With 4 hours remaining, she invited Ellie over and confessed her feelings, a secret she'd kept for years. To her surprise, Ellie kissed her in response. Why didn't you say something sooner? Ellie asked. Fear, Hannah admitted. Always fear. With 1 hour left, Hannah sat alone on her balcony watching the sunset, the watch in her palm. She felt strangely peaceful, having lived more honestly in the past 2 days and in years before. As the second hand approached 12, completing the final minute, Hannah closed her eyes, waiting for something. When nothing happened, she slowly opened them again. The watch had stopped. The phone rang, startling her. It was the hospital. Her father, with whom she'd reconciled just hours before, had suffered a massive stroke. By the time she arrived, he was gone. He went quickly, the doctor assured her. The time of death was 8:47 p.m., the exact moment her watch had stopped. Weeks later, Hannah returned to Hargrove's shop, watch in hand. The old man didn't seem surprised to see her. "It wasn't my death, it was counting down," she said. "No," he agreed. "It was measuring the time until you would need to understand loss again, as it did for your grandfather before his wife's passing, and as it will someday do for another." "I don't want it anymore," Hannah said, placing it on the counter. "You misunderstand its gift," Mr. Hargrove replied, pushing it back toward her. "It gave you the chance to make peace before it was too late. Few receive such opportunity." Hannah stared at the watch. "Will it count down again?" "Only when needed," he said. "Keep it close. When it begins ticking once more, you'll know it's time to put your affairs in order. Not for your passing, but for someone dear to you." Hannah hesitated, then took the watch back. "Does everyone in town have one of your pieces?" Mr. Hargrove's amber eyes seemed to look through her. "Only those who need certainty in uncertain times." As Hannah left the shop, the familiar cascade of bells marked her departure. The watch remained silent in her pocket, waiting, she now understood, for the next passing hour that would change her life forever.